So in case you needed a reminder that the country is broken, you had Friday, right? You know, it was not just the anniversary of the insurrection, but the kind of Kevin McCarthy fiasco. You know, watching that unfold on TV, you know, just the debacle and the power grabbing, and it was like a high school or middle school lunchroom, you know, just everybody climbing over everyone and trying to get in front of the camera. But as discouraging as that was, for me, it pales in comparison to the defense budget that was passed in the end of December with very little notice. If the defense budget had kept pace with inflation the last 15 years, it would be $700 billion. But it's $858 billion. It was $50 billion, what's $50 billion, more than President Biden had asked for. It had all kinds of things in there, like the Navy said we need 6 ships and they gave them 12, right? All kinds of things that weren't needed. It's not about Afghanistan, we're not there. It's not about Ukraine, the money for Ukraine is somewhere else in the budget. It's not about the military personnel who are struggling on low wages, because there was a small increase for them and there was another 2.5% that was asked for by the military brass for those people making under 45 grand, and that was cut. It's not about, you know, really any objective measure. Our military budget is bigger than the next 11 countries combined. Our military budget is bigger than the next 11 departments in our government. That budget is about military contractors and defense lobbyists. More than half of the money, like $458 billion, goes to Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and all that. And you know, the head of the Defense Department was formerly on the board of Raytheon before he was appointed to be the head of defense, where he was making $300,000 a year just being a defense contractor. There's over $100 million a year spent on defense lobbyists. So every single congressperson has a couple of lobbyists on them all the time. And that whole example, you know, it's one of the reasons that our education, our health, our you know, just our basic infrastructure of the country is so starved because of this massive amount of money. And so we come on this Epiphany Sunday in a world of Herod, right? In a world of empire and corruption and greed and power grabbing. And Matthew's gospel, right at the very beginning, gives us a choice in how we want to live. We've got Herod, and then we have the 3 kings. Now, to be fair, they're not really 3 kings, they're really magi. They're like astrologers or wise ones or poets. And really what Matthew is trying to set up here is not a choice between these 3, because there might have been 5 or 7 or 10 visitors from the east. The idea that there were 3 kings comes from the fact that there were 3 gifts. No, really, Matthew is trying to set up a choice between King Herod and Jesus, the King of the Jews. And he's trying to say, you've got this option. You've got this one you can follow who is about oppression and power grabbing and greed, or you can follow this other one who's inviting us to live in a way that's based on righteousness, where every single thing that has value in our lives is how we live in relationship to the Creator and the creation, is how we foster right relationships. And Matthew wants to be sure we know that. And so right in the very beginning, he starts off in the genealogy connecting this Jesus to God's people, you know, son of David. This is not one who is separating from God's people. This is one who is calling to expand God's people. And then right after that, you know, you've got the 5 women who show up in that genealogy in Matthew 1, and they're not Sarah and Rachel and Rebecca. No, they're 5 women who live really far outside of kind of normal conventions and normal family structures. So the first 2, Tamar and Rahab, are both taken as prostitutes. And then you've got Ruth, and she seduces Boaz to keep her family line going. And then you've got Bathsheba, who commits adultery with David. And then you've got Mary, who's pregnant out of wedlock. So it's not like, well, this is just a who's of righteousness and purity codes, right? I mean, right now, Matthew is giving us a signal, and it's like, guess what? Guess who God's people includes? God's people, as it turns out, just includes everybody. And it's not about, you know, following this or following that or being connected. It's about the fact that we are called beloved. And that's what you hear. That's the most important thing in the whole baptism of Jesus, right? This is my beloved child in who I am well pleased. And so we are all connected because we're beloved. And so right off the bat, what Matthew gives us a choice between is a king, a kingdom, or a kingdom, really, being a part of God's beloved community, being a part of a community where we know that what really matters is not the power that we collect, but the people we collect. And that is such a basic message that it feels sort of silly almost to take up a sermon trying to remind ourselves that what really matters is one another and the relationships that we foster. All of us have had those kind of magical moments that just kind of crystallize for us that really, when it comes down to it, nothing matters but people. My daughter had that experience. I think a lot of us ended up with a Christmas that wasn't exactly what we expected. You know, she set out here on the 21st, 9 flights canceled later. She made it at 11 p.m. on the 25th. And then she was supposed to fly to Texas to see my parents on that Thursday, and that flight was canceled. So she ended up in a rental car, and she extended her time. So instead of spending, you know, Christmas Eve partying with friends in Tennessee, she was watching the TCU Michigan game with my parents. But that ended up being one of just the highlights. I mean, many of you have heard me talk about my father at 92 in the hospital, blessed my dad, who has to be about the biggest TCU Frog fan. Let's just pray that the doctors let him out tomorrow before the football game tomorrow. But no, seriously, my mom and dad met at TCU in a Spanish class in 1956. And my father was already a huge Frog fan. When he was a kid in Lake Worth as a Boy Scout, they would get on these flatbed trucks, and is this not frightening? And like 20 boys in their Boy Scout uniforms, and they would drive them in a flatbed truck, I'm sure hanging off of it, from Lake Worth to Fort Worth, where they would usher at the TCU games. So, and I grew up, unfortunately, in the 70s when TCU might win one game, you know, a season. I saw the coach die on the field. I saw a lot of things happen in the 70s that were very scarring for me at TCU football. But my dad is just, I mean, I bet you he has seen more TCU sporting events than anyone at 92. And so my daughter said, you know, when she got there, he could barely walk across the room. Then during the football game, you know, he's jumping up and down, go baby, go baby, go baby. I mean, it was just this magical moment. Of course, my daughter's documenting the whole thing and interviewing him and taking all this stuff. And it was one of those moments, and we have all had them, right? Where you know what matters in life. Really? I mean, really, what matters in life? But these perfect, beautiful moments when we are with one another, when we are reminded that when it all comes down to it, who is there at the end of their life thinking, damn, wish I would have made a better stock pick, right? No, nobody's thinking that. Nobody's thinking, if only I had more garages in my car. Everybody is thinking about the moments that they were with the people they loved. And the wisest people, the true magi, understand that the more you can take that word kin or family and the bigger you can make it, the richer and broader and more amazing your life is. Grant Wahl is one of those people who did that, and he's one of the people I want to honor who we lost this past year. Some of you know him. Grant Wahl was a sports writer. He wrote for Sports Illustrated for 25 years. He went to Shawnee Mission East. He is the sports writer who died in Qatar covering the World Cup a month ago, I think it is tomorrow. And after he died, his wife, who is one of Biden's COVID doctors, she's brilliant doctor, was on CNN a lot last year. She wrote several beautiful pieces and had several beautiful interviews with NPR in which she talked about how she wanted people to understand what a remarkable human being Grant was, how dedicated he was to begin with to family. When she made her first trip to India, to the village her father came from, he went with her and he just endeared himself to the whole village. When she met him, her little sister was 8, and Grant sat there on the floor and played chess with her for hours. During the darkest moments of COVID, and they lost 3 of their parents in the last few years, Grant was right there with her the whole way. He had this remarkably huge heart. But Grant Wahl was a person for whom family and people meant everybody. Some of you know he started off when he was 16 and a kid at Shawnee Mission East. He wrote the cover story about LeBron James for Sports Illustrated. But he had written Sports Illustrated when he was like in elementary school, and asked him for a job, you know, but he ended up working there for 25 years. But then when he was at Princeton, he began to follow soccer, and he got a grant to go to Argentina one of the summers, spent the whole summer there studying kind of the political machinations of the Argentina football club, kind of following other social scientists. And he came really to love soccer because soccer is the sport of every man and every woman. It's just a sport that everybody can play. And once you understand soccer, you really understand a culture. And for Grant, soccer was a way in to the culture and the people. I mean, if you've been to Central America, if you've been to South Africa, you have seen kids playing soccer with balls just like this. It is something people do everywhere. And Grant was one of those people who loved people and he wanted to understand them. And his idea of family wasn't just, you know, the people who were easily accepted. It was the people who were pushed out. And I think many of you know that when he died, when he collapsed, there was a lot of speculation that he'd been poisoned or killed because he was such an outspoken advocate for women in sports, people of color, LGBTQ, that he had shown up kind of right in the face of Herod, right in the face of the Qatari government and the kingdom, criticizing. He had been criticizing them long before he got to the World Cup for all the deaths that happened, you know, building the stadiums. Some people say it was 500 migrant workers. Some people say it was 5,000. It was a lot of deaths that happened. And he showed up at the opening match between the United States and Wales wearing a rainbow flag shirt. And he was detained for over half an hour. And he kept, you know, his brother was gay. And he was a big proponent of trying to say, and you know, homosexuality is illegal in Qatar. Like, what does that even mean, right? But he was right there pushing it out, trying for, and the day before he died, a month ago today, he wrote his last article called "They Just Don't Care." And in that article, he talked about the Filipino migrant worker who had just died, had been covered up. He had died falling from a forklift on during one of the you know, things that they were working on during the World Cup. And when they pressed, you know, the leader of Qatar about it, he said, "Why are you asking me about this? People die every day. People die in their sleep, people die at work, people just die. We feel sorry for them, but why are you asking me about it?" They just didn't care. And Grant Wahl went on to write about that, and he thought, this was the day before Grant Wahl died, you know, he said, how would that family of that migrant worker so far from home, imagine how they would feel if they could hear the leader of Qatar speaking like this. I mean, you and I know that people are just thrown away. But Grant Wahl was trying to say, no, the world is a place where every single person belongs, right? It's not a kingdom, it's a kingdom. That's what really matters. And after he died, Joe Posnanski, storied sports writer, wrote a beautiful tribute to him in which he started off saying, he was the best of us. He was the best of us. It was a gorgeous piece. And Posnanski talked about how much he had learned about soccer from Grant Wahl, that he was just so effusive, that he did more to put soccer on the map in this country than just about anyone, his zeal and his passion. But he said, every time I had an interaction with him, and he said, right now I'm thinking of 100 interactions, and now I'm thinking of 1,000. Every interaction I had with Grant Wahl, I walked away from it feeling like I needed to be a better person. And then he said, Grant Wahl left us with a legacy. He left us with more than friendships and words and love. He left us with a challenge. Be braver, be bolder, be kinder, stand up for what's right. Be braver, be bolder, be kinder, stand up for what's right. As we begin this Epiphany season, may we follow the wise ones. May we follow the ones who keep putting the stars out there in front of us, calling us to see what really matters, right? People over power, kin over kingdom, compassion over corruption. May we seek to be like Grant Wahl, a person who lives for ourselves and lives for others. Amen.